Hey guys, Karenology here. Get ready because this story is pure chaos from start to finish.
The scent of freshly mowed grass lingered in the air as I sat on my porch, relishing the first warm evening of spring. A cold beer in hand, I finally felt at peace after the grueling weeks of unpacking and settling into my new home. It was supposed to be the quiet suburban dream, a place where my family and I could finally breathe. But that illusion shattered the moment I met Karen. Karen, the self-appointed enforcer of our homeowner association's bylaws, emerged from her house like a storm. Her scowl was visible even from across the street, her tightly curled hair bouncing with every determined step she took toward my yard. I barely had time to take another sip before her shrill voice cut through the tranquil evening. "Excuse me, sir, what do you think you're doing?" she barked, her finger pointed accusingly at the beer bottle in my hand. I blinked, taken aback. "Enjoying my garden?" I replied cautiously, unsure of where this was going. "Absolutely not," she snapped. "Alcohol is strictly prohibited in outdoor spaces within the community. It's against the homeowner association's rules." I let out a disbelieving laugh. "You're kidding, right? This is my property." "The bylaws are clear," she hissed, producing a neatly folded copy of the rules from her handbag as if she carried it everywhere. "You're in violation, and I have every right to report you." Before I could respond, she pulled out her phone. 911? Yes, I'd like to report a disturbance. There's a man drinking alcohol in his yard, and I'm concerned for the safety of the neighborhood. My jaw dropped. Within minutes, two police cars arrived, lights flashing. The officers, visibly confused by the call, approached cautiously. "Good evening," one of them said, glancing at me and then at Karen, who was theatrically clutching her chest as though I had committed a heinous crime. "We received a report about drinking." I gestured to the single beer bottle on the table. "Just enjoying the evening, officer, on my property." Karen interjected before I could finish. "He's endangering the community. Drinking leads to rowdiness, and we don't tolerate that here." The officers exchanged a glance, clearly unimpressed. "Ma'am, there's no law against having a drink on private property. This is a civil matter." Karen's face turned a shade of red I didn't think was possible. "Civil matter? Are you kidding me? He's breaking the homeowner association rules. You have to do something." The officers gave me a sympathetic look. "Sir, we're just going to let you handle this with your association. Have a good evening." As they left, Karen rounded on me. "You think you can get away with this? You have no idea who you're dealing with." And with that, she stormed off. That was just the beginning. A week later, I found an official-looking notice taped to my door. It claimed I owed a fine for violating community standards and threatened further action if I didn't comply. I couldn't believe it. I decided to attend the next homeowner association meeting to address this madness head-on. The meeting was held in a sterile community hall. Karen sat at the head of the table, flanked by other board members who looked more like her cronies than impartial leaders. The moment I entered, I felt the weight of their judgmental stares. "Mr. Carter," Karen began, her tone dripping with condescension, "we're here to discuss your blatant disregard for our community's rules." "Blatant disregard?" I shot back. "I had one beer on my porch, on my property. How is that a crime?" She smirked, clearly enjoying the power trip. "It's not about the beer. It's about respecting the rules that keep our community harmonious." I glanced at the other board members, hoping for support, but they averted their eyes. Karen clearly had them under her thumb. "This is ridiculous," I said firmly. "You can't fine me for something that isn't even illegal." Karen's smile turned icy. "Refusal to pay will result in further penalties. Perhaps you'd prefer a lien on your property?" My stomach churned. This wasn't about rules, it was about control. And I wasn't about to let her bully me. But the more I pushed back, the worse things got. A few days later, I came home to find construction equipment parked on the edge of my yard. My fence had been partially torn down, and workers were digging into the ground. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded, storming toward the foreman. He barely looked up from his clipboard. "We're expanding the community park. Got approval from the homeowner association." "Approval?" I said, my voice rising. "This is my property." Karen appeared out of nowhere, her arms crossed smugly. "Actually, Mr. Carter, this section was deemed common land in the latest review of property boundaries." My blood boiled. "You can't just take my land." "Oh, but we can," she said, her tone sweetly venomous. "Perhaps you should have read the fine print when you moved in." This was war, and I was ready to fight. The sun was setting as I stood by the edge of my property, staring at the gaping hole where my fence used to be. The construction crew had left for the day, their equipment parked haphazardly on what was still legally my land. My fist clenched as Karen's smug face replayed in my mind, her words dripping with mockery. Perhaps you should have read the fine print. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. The next morning I was at the county records office, poring over property maps and deed documents. It took hours, but I finally found the proof I needed. My property lines hadn't changed in decades, and the section they claimed as common land was indisputably mine. Armed with this evidence, I filed a formal complaint with the county and demanded an immediate investigation. It didn't take long for Karen to catch wind of my actions. That evening, as I returned home, she was waiting for me on the sidewalk, flanked by two board members who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. "Mr. Carter," she began, her voice syrupy sweet, "we've heard about your, little inquiry. It's quite unnecessary, I assure you. Everything has been handled appropriately by the homeowner association." I folded my arms. "Handled appropriately? You tore down my fence and started construction on my land. That's theft." Her smile faltered, but she quickly recovered. "Let's not be dramatic. The community's needs sometimes require adjustments, and your contribution will benefit everyone." "My contribution?" I snapped. "You mean the land you're stealing?" Karen's eyes narrowed. "I'd be careful with my words if I were you. The homeowner association has a reputation to uphold, and baseless accusations could lead to consequences." The threat hung in the air, but I refused to back down. "I have proof," I said, holding up a folder of documents. "The county is already looking into it." For the first time, Karen's confidence wavered. She opened her mouth to respond, but one of the board members, an older man with a tired expression, interrupted. "Karen, maybe we should reconsider the situation," he murmured, avoiding her glare. "If there's a mistake, we don't want it to escalate." Karen's lips thinned, but she forced a smile. "Of course, we'll review the matter internally, but I'd advise you to drop the complaint, Mr. Carter. It'll save everyone a lot of trouble." I didn't respond. Instead, I turned and walked away, feeling their eyes on my back. The following week, the tension in the neighborhood was palpable. Neighbors who had once waved hello now avoided me, their expressions guarded. Karen had clearly started a smear campaign, painting me as the troublemaker, disrupting the harmony of the community. Then came the letters. Every day, a new notice appeared in my mailbox. Fines for fabricated violations, warnings about unapproved landscaping, and even a demand to repaint my house to conform to community standards. It was blatant harassment, and I knew Karen was behind it. But the final straw came when I returned home one evening to find my driveway blocked by a new construction barricade. A sign declared that the area was temporarily closed for community improvements. My blood boiled as I saw Karen standing nearby, chatting with the construction foreman as if she owned the place. "Karen," I shouted, marching over. "What the hell is this?" She turned, her expression one of feigned surprise. "Oh, Mr. Carter, didn't you get the notice? We're installing a new pathway for the park. It'll run right through here." "Through my driveway?" I seethed. "This is private property." She shrugged. "The homeowner association deemed it a necessary improvement. You'll thank us later." I took a deep breath, trying to control my anger. "Move it, now!" Karen's smile turned icy. "I'm afraid that's not possible, but you're welcome to bring it up at the next meeting." I was done playing her games. Pulling out my phone, I began recording. "Say that again, for the record." Her composure faltered, but she quickly recovered. "Feel free to record, Mr. Carter. The homeowner association is acting within its rights." "We'll see what the court thinks about that," I shot back. Her expression darkened. "Be careful, Mr. Carter. You wouldn't want to make an enemy of the entire community." The barricade stayed up for days, forcing me to park on the street, but it only strengthened my resolve. With every petty act of retaliation, Karen was digging her own grave. I began gathering evidence, photos, videos, witness statements from the few neighbors who hadn't been cowed into silence. The county investigation was moving slowly, but I was building a case they couldn't ignore. Then one night, things escalated further. I woke to the sound of shattering glass. Racing outside, I found my car's windows smashed and the word traitor spray-painted across the hood. My heart sank as I realized Karen had taken her vendetta to a new level. The next morning, I filed a police report. As I described the harassment, the officer taking my statement frowned. You're not the first to complain about that homeowner association, he admitted, but proving anything is tough. They know how to cover their tracks. Not this time, I said firmly. I have evidence, and I'm not backing down. The officer nodded. Good, because it sounds like you're going to need all the help you can get. The morning after my car was vandalized, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Karen's escalating tactics had crossed a line, and I was determined to expose her and the homeowner association for the bullies they were. The police report I had filed was a start, but I knew it wouldn't be enough. I needed undeniable proof that they were breaking the law. My first step was to install security cameras around my property. I wanted to capture any future acts of vandalism or harassment. Within days, the cameras paid off. Late one night, I received an alert on my phone. Checking the live feed, I saw two figures sneaking around my yard. One of them carried a can of spray paint. I immediately called the police. By the time the officers arrived, the vandals were gone, but the cameras had captured everything. The footage clearly showed one of the intruders was a member of the homeowner association board. The other, Karen herself. The officers watched the footage with grim expressions. "This is solid evidence," one of them said. "We'll bring them in for questioning." The next day, word spread quickly around the neighborhood. Karen's carefully crafted image as a community leader was beginning to crack. But instead of backing down, she doubled down. Flyers appeared on every doorstep, accusing me of endangering the community and spreading lies. She even held an emergency homeowner association meeting to address the growing threat I supposedly posed. I decided to attend. If Karen wanted to paint me as the villain, I would confront her in front of everyone. The meeting was packed, the room buzzing with tension as neighbors whispered among themselves. Karen sat at the head of the table, her expression a mix of smugness and feigned concern. "Mr. Carter," she began when I entered, "how kind of you to join us. We were just discussing your recent actions." "You mean the actions of defending my property and exposing the truth?" I shot back, holding up the security footage. "Because I have evidence that you and another board member vandalized my car and trespassed on my property." Gasps rippled through the room as I played the footage on my laptop. The screen angled for everyone to see. Karen's face paled, but she quickly recovered, forcing a laugh. "This is absurd," she said. "That footage could be doctored. And even if it's real, I was simply inspecting the property for community safety." "At 2 in the morning, with spray paint?" I countered. Her composure cracked further, but she wasn't done. "Ladies and gentlemen," she addressed the room, "this man has been a disruptive force since he moved in. He refuses to follow the rules and now seeks to undermine our community with baseless accusations." Before I could respond, a voice from the back of the room spoke up. "That's enough, Karen." All eyes turned to an elderly woman I recognized as Mrs. Henderson, one of the longest-standing residents. She stood leaning on her cane, her voice firm despite her frail appearance. "I've lived here for 30 years, Mom," she said, "and I've seen this association change. It used to be about helping each other, not bullying neighbors. What you're doing to Mr. Carter is wrong." More murmurs filled the room, and I saw a few nods of agreement. Karen's face twisted in anger, but she didn't dare interrupt. Encouraged, I addressed the group. "I moved here because I wanted a safe, friendly place for my family. Instead, I've been met with harassment, vandalism, and lies. This isn't about rules, it's about control. Karen and her cronies think they can do whatever they want, but I'm not backing down." The room erupted in chatter. Some people voiced their support, while others remained silent, clearly intimidated by Karen's presence. But the tide was turning. Karen slammed her gavel on the table, demanding order. "This meeting is adjourned," she declared, storming out of the room with her followers trailing behind her. That night, I felt a glimmer of hope. For the first time, I wasn't alone in this fight, but Karen wasn't going to give up easily. A week later, I came home to find a notice taped to my door. It was an official letter from the homeowner association informing me that my property was under review for non-compliance. According to the letter, my fence height, landscaping, and even the color of my front door violated community standards. They gave me 30 days to correct these issues or face severe fines. It was clear retaliation. I spent hours documenting every detail of my property, comparing it to the bylaws. Nothing I found supported their claims, but Karen didn't care about facts. She wanted to bury me in paperwork and legal battles. I reached out to a lawyer specializing in homeowner disputes. She listened intently as I explained the situation and reviewed the evidence I had gathered. "You have a strong case," she said, "but be prepared. They'll try to drag this out and make it as difficult as possible for you." "Let them try," I replied. "I'm not going anywhere." As the days passed, the pressure mounted. The homeowner association filed complaints against me almost daily, each one more ridiculous than the last. But I refused to give in. With my lawyer's help, I filed a countersuit accusing the association of harassment, defamation, and illegal actions. The neighborhood was divided. Some residents avoided me entirely, afraid of becoming targets themselves. Others quietly voiced their support, slipping notes of encouragement into my mailbox. And through it all, Karen continued her campaign of intimidation, refusing to admit defeat. But I wasn't fighting just for myself anymore. This was about standing up to a system that thrived on fear and control, and I was ready for whatever came next. The courtroom buzzed with quiet murmurs as I sat at the plaintiff's table, my lawyer flipping through a meticulously organized binder of evidence. Across the room, Karen sat flanked by her attorney and two other board members from the homeowner association. She looked composed, but the tight grip she had on her pen betrayed her nerves. The lawsuit I had filed had finally come to trial. It had taken months of depositions, discovery, and endless paperwork, but we were here. My lawyer had built a strong case: harassment, defamation, and illegal property violations. The evidence was damning, from the security footage of Karen vandalizing my car to the fraudulent notices and fines they had issued me. As the judge entered the courtroom, silence fell. Everyone rose, and the trial began. The first day was dedicated to opening arguments and witness testimonies. My lawyer laid out the timeline of events, detailing the homeowner association's targeted harassment and Karen's personal vendetta against me. Karen's lawyer, on the other hand, painted me as a disruptive newcomer who refused to respect community rules. But their defense started to crumble when we presented the security footage. The jury's expressions shifted as they watched Karen spray painting my car and sneaking around my property. On the second day, I took the stand. My voice was steady as I recounted the months of harassment, the damage to my property, and the toll it had taken on my family. I described the fear and frustration of being targeted for simply standing up for my rights. When my lawyer asked me how I felt about the homeowner association's actions, I didn't hold back. "This isn't about community standards or rules," I said firmly. "This is about control." Karen and her board used their power to bully and intimidate me, all because I refused to let them take what was mine. But I'm not afraid of them anymore. When Karen took the stand, her demeanor was a mix of defiance and feigned innocence. She claimed she was only protecting the community and insisted that her actions were justified. But under cross-examination, my lawyer poked holes in her story, forcing her to admit inconsistencies and exposing her lies. "Mrs. Harper," my lawyer said, addressing Karen by her full name, "can you explain why you were on Mr. Carter's property at 2 in the morning with spray paint?" Karen hesitated, her carefully constructed facade cracking. I was inspecting the area for safety concerns." "With spray paint?" my lawyer pressed. Karen's cheeks flushed. "It was a misunderstanding." By the end of her testimony, even some of her staunchest supporters in the room looked uncomfortable. The cracks in her story were impossible to ignore. The trial lasted 3 days, but the verdict was swift. The jury found in my favor, awarding me damages for their harassment and defamation. The judge also issued an injunction against the homeowner association, prohibiting them from taking further action against me without clear and legal cause. Karen's reputation was in shambles, and the other board members quickly distanced themselves from her. But the victory wasn't just about the money or the legal win. It was about reclaiming my life and showing that bullies like Karen couldn't always get away with their schemes. As I walked out of the courtroom, neighbors who had once been silent now approached me, offering apologies and support. Some even admitted that they had been afraid to speak out, fearing Karen's retaliation. In the weeks that followed, Karen resigned from the homeowner association board, citing personal reasons. A new board was elected, one that promised to focus on transparency and fairness. The fines and bogus violations against me were officially rescinded, and my property was finally left in peace. One evening, as I sat on my porch with a cold beer, I reflected on everything that had happened. The scars of the battle were still fresh, but I felt a sense of pride. I had stood up to Karen and the homeowner association, and I had won. My home was truly mine again, And the quiet suburban dream I'd once hoped for finally felt within reach. But the biggest victory was the lesson learned. Standing up for what's right is never easy, but it's always worth it.